everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for another Coldwell Banker Bain training event. My name is Melissa McGee, and I am in the education department. We also have Maxine McDade, our training coordinator, who is our moderator today. If you want to say hello, Max.
Hi there.
And also joining us, we have Ward Spears, our principal managing broker of our Lake Oswego, Oregon branch.
Hi there. Looking forward to the session here at the event.
Yes.
Yes.
So speaking of, today's topic is distance learning tips for parents. You know, this distance learning journey has been quite challenging, and honestly, it would be even without a world pandemic. You know, the purpose of this event is to help your child get set up and learn to be as productive as possible at home. This is in support of all of you parents. You know, we want to help you get involved with your child's online learning by staying organized, setting goals, keeping your child motivated, and finding balance for your entire family. I myself, you know, I am a full-time working mother. I have 2 children at home. I know that Ward has one as well, and it's been quite challenging. So today we have 2 incredible teachers joining us on our panel. We have Christina Kellogg and we have Mark Kalal, and I'm going to give them a minute to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about how long they've been teaching, what grade they teach, and what area.
All right, I'll go first. My name is Mark Kalal. I am been teaching for 10 years. I teach first grade right now, and I've been teaching first grade for the past 9 years. I teach in Bellevue, Washington. I'm at an independent school. And I also have a kindergartner and a second grade daughter. So I kind of have a kindergartner, and I have my first grade students, and then I have my second grade daughter. So right in the mix of being a parent and being a teacher.
My name is Christina Kellogg. I've been teaching for 5 years in the Toppenish School District. It's in the Yakima area. I've been teaching 6th grade English language arts, and initially I wanted to teach high school, but this was the job that I got as my first year teaching, and I kind of stuck with it because I did fall in love with my 6th graders. So.
Aww. Thank you both so much for, you know, volunteering your time to be a part of this. I, as a parent, greatly appreciate it. And I just want you to know how much we respect you both for doing everything that you do for our children. I cannot imagine being online and, you know, trying to keep these children and your students motivated and engaged. So thank you so much for everything that you do for us. So Christina has created a presentation for us, and really what we're going to do is take you through. She has, you know, created tips and tricks, and her and Mark are going to take you guys through whatever they can to make your lives easier at home. And again, really, so it's how to be as productive as possible so that you can work, whether it's full-time or part-time, and help your children by keeping them engaged and motivated. So Christina, if you want to take us through your presentation, and then Ward and I will kind of ask questions along the way.
Yep. Okay. So first tip here is being involved. And so being involved can be as simple as, you know, just asking your child what they did that day at the dinner table, just checking in, you know, once a day with them and making it really casual, you know, not asking too many questions if it's not needed. And then the other option is, you know, ask your child's teacher if they use any other communication platforms other than email. There's a ton of different apps out there, and I'll actually talk about that later on. But you know, emailing your child's teacher once every 2 weeks, once every 3 weeks, it's really up to the parent, and you know, depending on how your child is doing. So being actively involved is really encouraged.
I'd like to just jump in on being involved. Also is thinking about some of those things you have with the lower school is you have the daily schedule that they have for their class, but then also there's a lot of time where you have those breaks. And I think like being involved is sometimes being involved in those times where there might be even like a lunch break or maybe a half-hour break of trying to have a plan of what are the kids going to do during that time, and maybe even practicing that stuff of what are you going to do when it's a half hour and I'm on a call, having options for them that are already there, that everything's already set out, ready to go. So I think being involved, and also very important of making sure you're emailing and staying in communication with the teacher.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that. This next tip is having a daily planner or a schedule for your child. So I have a couple examples here. It could look different with depending on the age. So Mark, you can hop in. But this is what I took from my actual school. So this is our schedule on the left. We have an AM and a PM session. But besides that, my tip is to have the schedule, their class schedule posted somewhere where they're working, so that it's easily accessible to them. They know what to expect, when to go to their next class, or if they're in the primary grades, when to go to their next subject, or when they're going to transition to their next subject. And then if you want, you can even personalize it. When will they get their break, so that they can see, okay, when do I get a break here? Make it visible for them. And then on the right, I have an example of, this is how my kids actually fill out their planners at school last year when we had planners. We don't have them now, but just two examples here. So, and you can have both for your kids. So you can have the schedule posted and then have their planner next to them also, because for their planner, they can put in, what assignments they're working on, what homework they have for that day, any practice that they need to do. So if you can see here, Monday the 16th, this is one example. On the left, I apologize if it's messy, but on the left, I just have periods. So one through six, periods 1 through 6, if you're in the secondary, and then the activity that they did in that class. So for first period, whatever that may be. For me, it's advisory. So my kids wrote a reflection on something. So just keeping track of what you're doing. And then on the right, I have H for homework all the way down. If they have homework to do in that specific class. So whatever that may be, maybe there's no homework at all. And this would be good for parents to look at too, as a check-in, to see what their kids are doing. The second one is just almost identical. It's the same. Instead of having period numbers, you can have subjects. So, for primary grades too, advisory, math, science, history, and then I just have the same activities here. And then homework, you always want to put, however you do write your classes down, you always want to make sure that your child can write down if they have any homework or activities that they're expected to do before the next class period or the next class day. So, Mark, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think a lot of times with some of these kids, especially in the younger grades, is I've seen a great improvement of a lot of time management. I've actually had parents tell me that, wait, my kid is one of the main things that they can learn from is time management during this time. I've had kids learning to set alarms on their setting different alarms, maybe using an iPad or maybe using something else, where trying to give them the I guess the ownership of their schedule. I think it's important that you provide a good schedule for them and have it outlined for the day, but then try to make sure that they can take it. They can do the ownership. They can make sure that they're going to go through these different times. And if they fail, they fail sometimes. I mean, if they miss a class and they're 5 minutes late one time, that's okay. But just trying to have them take the ownership and not be like you having to check in on them. I think that's where I've seen a lot of my kids be successful, is taking the ownership of having their time and their work on their own.
I definitely agree with that, taking ownership.
And Mark, you have little kids and you look after little kids, right?
Yeah.
And yet that's really good.
Yeah, I think, and it has been. I mean, I would say sometimes it has been a struggle with some kids, but some of the most successful kids that I've seen are the kids that are almost doing it on their own sometimes. And I think as like a parent, though, sometimes I think the hardest thing is you don't want to see your kids fail and struggle, but if they don't do it on their own, they're never going to do it. And that's where I think it's one of the hardest things. We'll probably get into it later, but watching your kids struggle can be really, really hard, and you don't want to see that. But then once they kind of get it on their own, they really can be proud of themselves. They're really like kind of a little bit more buy-in. Sometimes I've seen some kids just go like, "Mom, get away. I know how to do this." So it's really good to see, but it also sometimes it can be really hard, and there's some learning curves, but a great way for them to feel good about themselves sometimes.
All right. My next tip here is making sure that you're keeping your child's morning routine normal. So think of pre-COVID, when they would get up, get ready for school, get dressed. And I think keeping that, even having that experience myself when I started working from home, it made a difference. There were times where I would wear sweats, and then other times I wouldn't. And I felt more, and I'm, an adult, and I felt more productive. And so if you keep your kids on a normal morning routine, getting them up early, eating breakfast, getting dressed, like as if they were going to be going into the classroom, it helps mentally, I think, prepare them for the day. And and also they are attending school, so you do want them to look professional for their school, as if they were to dress and go into school. And so it's important that they know that too.
Yeah, I really think a lot of times it's making sure a lot of times that breakfast is already eaten, or because sometimes kids will get on there and be seeing, like, I've had some actually eat a hot dog in the morning, which I've been like, what? A hot dog? It's 8:00. But having those routines, and also, I mean, I think one of those things I've noticed it too is when I go into school, I usually go into school and teach, and just kind of being in that right mindset. And I think one other thing of having this routine is also, if you have an opportunity where the kid can do their work maybe outside of their bedroom, can be really helpful. I've seen a lot of kids that work in their bedroom. Some do a wonderful job, but some kids, it can just be that distraction, and it can be kind of not having that different place of learning, or kind of thinking of it as school, like school's over here, bedroom's over here, and just that little bit of disconnect between the two, and being able to take a break from like school place to bedroom place. So.
And I mean, I'm the same way. I have to get up. I have my coffee on an alarm, and I have to get up, get dressed, like I'm going to work. And I think same with our children. Like they need to get up, open their blinds, have some breakfast, have some orange juice or whatever, and brush their teeth and get ready like they're actually going to school.
And I think that, I mean, just looking at it as my family too, I think about the analogy when you're putting the oxygen on and then plane crash, put it on yourself first. So sometimes being the adult, if you're just like, you're telling the kids to do all these things, you need to take care of yourself before you're able to tell your kids what to do, and be able, I mean, it's being that example of seeing like, okay, yeah, that's what I need to do. I should get ready. I need to go to school today and kind of making sure that having the good attitude and and getting ready for the day.
Yeah, the other thing too is I've had, we've been doing distance learning for months now, and I've had kids, Miss, can I go shower real quick? Or Miss, can I go brush my teeth real quick? I've had a kid turn his camera on while he's in bed with his shirt off, a boy. And it's comical, but it's also distracting. So, I can't tell the kids what to do. I can't say, no, you can't go take a shower. I mean, I don't feel like that is my place. However, I did have to ask the kid to put a shirt on, but it's a disruption too, because you have to stop class if those types of things occur, which, they did for me a lot. So, having your kid ready and just avoiding those disruptions is, would be a good idea also.
Yeah.
Do you require your students to have their videos turned on? Because my daughter is in high school. She's a sophomore, and they do not require them to have their videos turned on. I think maybe one or two of her classes, but a majority of them don't require their students to have their videos turned on. They just have to, engage by the chat panel. And I think they do like thumbs up, and then they have to obviously unmute and speak. But how challenging would that be? I mean, you guys both have to have their videos turned on, right? You require them to?
We are not allowed to require our kids. We can't. One of the reasons is because, 98% of my kids live in poverty. So they felt that, their living conditions may not be something they want to show on the camera.
Wow.
There are some, they kind of left it up to the teacher. However, we can't call home and say your kid needs to turn on their camera. So some teachers asked their students to turn their cameras on. I did in the beginning because I wanted to see their faces. I had never met them before. Some kids I could not get them to turn their camera on. And it was frustrating, because I really had no control over it. I wanted to see their faces, but I couldn't. And you also don't know if they're there. So I had a lot of kids, log in. I would ask them a question direct. They wouldn't answer. And so their cameras were off. I assumed they were not even at the computer. So it was frustrating. After a while, I kind of stopped asking them to turn on their cameras because I felt like it was almost kind of wasting time. Some teachers used incentives, like we have a point system in our school. So that worked for some teachers, not for others. But it ultimately comes down to if the kid wants to do the work, they're going to do the work with the camera on or off. So, Mark, I don't know if you wanted to share or not.
We don't require them to have their screen on, but there are kids that will turn it off. And usually what happens is just I'll have like one-on-ones with those kids and find out the reasons why their screen is off. I mean, that's the most important, is like, why is your screen off? And just making sure that they're doing the right thing. So there's times I know where some kids, they'll go off because they might not have a good internet connection and taking the screen off. But it's really just having that relationship with them and knowing like, okay, he's fine if he goes off for 5 minutes. And then if I ask him, hey, are you there? And they're right there and ready to answer. So I think it's just that I've had to have a few little communications with some parents, just letting them know kind of, hey, why is the screen off? And they're like, no, it shouldn't be off. It should be on. So it's just kind of having that relationship with the parents and the student.
Yeah, I did have some parents actually that I talked to required their kids to have their screens on, which I think is a great idea because you're holding your child accountable for being present and being involved. So that's something that I would have done in my situation. So yeah. Okay, so the next tip is goal setting. So there's a type of goal setting that I do in my advisory class. It's called SMART goals. And it kind of has some criteria that you should have for creating an achievable goal, really. So making sure it's specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and then timely or time-based. So I have some examples here. My kids, I teach this, so my kids know, how to write these, but it's really simple to share with your kids. So on the right, I have an example of being specific versus non-specific. So, if you want to make good grades, you can't just have them say, I want good grades, right? You want to have them state what grade do they want? Is it a percentage? Do they want to improve their grade from a C to a B? Have them be specific. Measurable is where they, it's measurable, where at the end of the week or however long their goal is for, they can measure, okay, did I do this or did I not do this? So this is an example. I want to make a lot of free throws. Well, that's not measurable because what is a lot, right? So instead, have them write, I want to make 9 out of 10, right? And notice that these goals don't have to be academic. They can be personal goals. Achievable, so that means just making it realistic for the kids. And, like a non-realistic goal would be, I want to make 200 free throws tonight. That's not really achievable, right? So changing that to, I want to learn 30 new vocabulary words next quarter. That's achievable. Or even I tell my kids, we do weekly goals, and some of my kids say, I want to get my D up to an A this week. And I'm thinking, that's a good goal, but is it achievable in 1 week, right? So maybe start small and say, I want to get my D up to a C. Realistic, Actually, it's supposed to be relevant, so I apologize for that typo right there, but it's relevant, making it relevant to what you want to accomplish. So an unrelevant example would be, I will dance around for 20 minutes to be a better reader. That doesn't really make sense, right? The two don't go together. You can't do one and achieve the other. So a relevant goal would be, I'll read for 25 minutes per night for 1 month to build my vocabulary or my reading time. So making sure it's relevant. And then the last one is just giving your child a time frame so they know whether or not they've reached that goal. An example would be, a non-example would be, I want to learn to play the piano. Okay, well, by when though? Because you want to know if you've done that or not in the time frame that you're giving yourself. So putting a date on it is always a good idea. So, and on the left-hand side is just another example for, younger kids or older kids, actually. I will read 20 minutes every night before bed for 1 month by January 1st. So it can be pretty simple. For high schoolers, it can be a more complex goal, and they could even, what my kids do is they even list 2 steps that they're going to do or take to help them reach that goal. So you can see that this example shows that I will do that by, and then they can say like how they're going to do that. Going back to this picture here on the right, having them write it down. So you'll see that I have an example for daily goals. If they have a planner, or just any piece of paper, really, they can make daily goals or weekly goals. Daily would be one like, I don't think I followed the SMART goal when I made this one, but finish my homework before dinner. So I put a time on it. I wasn't very specific. So, make sure that they're specific, homework for which class, all of the homework, maybe for periods 1, 2, and 3. And then they could write that down for every day. If they did a weekly goal, my kids typically just write it at the top of that week in their planner. So raising my B to an A in English by Friday.
I think a lot of like some of the goals that I focus on are kind of more like virtuous goals, sometimes of like kids being responsible and being respectful for that younger age, and really maybe not goals, but just kind of pointing out when have you been responsible? When have you been respectful today? When have you been kind? And thinking of those different things that they do throughout the day, of trying to focus on those positive things throughout the day. So if you're a parent and maybe just thinking like, what are 3 things that you did that was responsible today? And maybe just picking out some sort of a virtue for that day, and maybe it doesn't have to be academics. Maybe it's just making sure you got on your call every time, or making sure that you weren't bothering your sister when she was trying to work. So kind of just doing some of those other sort of, they're obviously goals, but maybe not just academic related. But I think you said there's some, even like some of these things of, one thing I had that I liked from this one kid I had this year was he really wanted to learn how to type. And it was like, we're not doing typing, but it's like something that she was practicing on her own so she could chat to her friends. And it was like, yeah, that's a great thing. Not something we're doing in school, but a thing that you can kind of do on your own, or learn the Rubik's Cube, or some of those things that right now where they have an opportunity to maybe do some of those things that during like times that aren't during school, but during those break times.
Yeah, I agree with that. A lot of my kids make behavioral goals, that are not related to grades or anything like that. And so that would be important for kids that are also struggling a little bit, probably mentally, emotionally. And for, things that they want to do for fun too. Those are still goals, right? And for younger kids, you could even use that as, an incentive. So as a parent saying, okay, if you want to learn how to do the Rubik's Cube, how are you going to do that? Make sure you're responsible today, or, make sure you show respect today, and we'll practice the Rubik's Cube. So, there's a ton of different ways you could do it. Just, parents know their kids best, whatever fits them the best. Just having a designated workspace. This is a big one. It kind of goes back to the same like morning routine, trying to keep things as normal as possible and making them feel like they are sort of in the classroom as best as you can. I have 3 different pictures here. I put these intentionally on here because they're kind of 3 different examples. So on the top right, I actually was Googling photos and I found this and I thought it was so cool because I had never seen it before. And there was multiple pictures of parents who had bought these trifold poster boards and set them up with, their schedules, their name. This kid has a map, and then he has that little box of supplies. I thought it was so cute, maybe for the younger kids. And then on the bottom is just a typical, desk with supplies on it, maybe in their bedroom or in a spare room. And then on the left, because, not having a designated workspace may not be what it looks like for every family. So on the left, I put, all the kids working at one table in the dining room because that's life, and which is fine. Quiet workspace is not always going to be available or doable for our kids. They have siblings. Maybe the parents are working from home too, and they have to be out there watching dogs, animals. I mean, you name it. So, just having a spot for them really is the most important thing, making them feel like they have their own workspace. So
I love the one up top because, let's just say that was like in a living space or a dining room table. I mean, how easy is that just to put out and then fold back up when they're done with school? But it still makes them feel like it's their own during the school hours. So I love that. And then I also wanted to comment too, one thing we do at our home on the picture at the bottom left is, our kids really enjoy it when we work together. And it's a way to keep each other accountable. So sometimes I'll take my computer, down from our home office downstairs, and my kids will have their computers and they'll be working, and then I'll be working on mine. And it's just a way to keep each other motivated where you can spend family time, but like also be working at the same time as well. And you can kind of peek over, how are you doing, honey? And then kind of help them out if they need it. But that's something that we do in our home too. And we really enjoy it, and the kids really enjoy it.
Yeah, I think going along with that is one thing is these spaces that you have is something built into your routine or your schedule is every single day when I have kids coming into school, it's kind of like they start new and start fresh with a clean desk. So it's like, don't leave that space and then come in the next morning and have that desk that's all has the papers everywhere and all that, of just making sure
like our teachers' desks.
look is good. But I always have my kids' desk. I always have the kids' desk. They're always, it's like set up for success. So thinking of that, how are you set up for success for today? And maybe even like having the materials that are close by. I know a lot of times having those things, it's like, okay, have the books that that the kids are going to have where they can just hand grab them, and instead of going somewhere else and then while they're going to get it, they get disrupted and then they come back and then they miss a minute of what's going on and then they're not sure what to do. So having those things on hand right close by is really important.
Yeah, and notice too that some of the kids have headphones in, which I think is really helpful too, so that they can actually hear, especially if there's other kids in the household or they're working from, they are working from home. So, our school gave out, we were fortunate enough to be able to give out earbuds to our kids if they weren't, accessible to them otherwise. So headphones are always a good idea if that works for your child. So this tip is, communicating with your child's teacher. So this is very important, especially at this time. I mean, it's always important, but especially now because your kid's not at school with your teacher. So email is typically, the number one, email or phone, is the number one, way of communication. Phones, I mean, not really at this time because for me, I was working from home for the first 2 months or so. I didn't have a work phone for my parents to call. I had set up an app called Remind where parents could message me. It was like it's like a text messaging app, sort of. You can give announcements and stuff. So I had set that up and I liked it a lot. It kids under 13 can't message you. It was very good about boundaries and that kind of thing. So what my tip is just reach out to your child's teacher and see what kind of platforms they use for communication. Some teachers might just stick with email, but I know a lot of teachers use Remind or even Class Dojo for communication with parents as well. So reach out and ask, and then, communicating is key. Once a week, once every 2 weeks, like I was saying before, however your child is doing, or even if they're doing well, still communicating with the teacher and knowing what's going on. If there's anything that you could do, for your child.
This is encouraging to hear, because I can tell you from my experience that at first I was a little timid and hesitant to reach out to, my children's teachers, because I want to annoy them. We know that you guys are extremely busy. And so, sending an email to check on, maybe there's a question about homework, or, hey, like, I noticed my child turned this in, like it hasn't been checked off yet, or, they're struggling with this topic or this specific class. Can you meet with them or whatever? So do you get irritated if parents communicate with you maybe too often? I just like hearing that you guys actually appreciate it when parents communicate with you. That's really good to know.
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of times with these parent emails it always, I think about is, what is your intent of what's your intent for the email of why are you sending it to the teacher? I think sometimes where you're working as a team with this teacher. You're someone that's going to be helping your child. Your teacher is always going to be looking out for the best interests of your kid. So even sometimes if you don't agree with the teacher, is thinking to yourself, they're not trying to do bad of your kid. They're trying to do the best that they can do at that time. So thinking of what is your positive intent for delivering the message, even if it's a simple question, just asking it. And then, because a lot of times we might think that, well, we're all on the same page. We all know what we're doing right now. But if we're not, then just kind of making sure that we are. I just think there's a lot of positive things that can come out with that parent and teacher and student that working as a team. So knowing that they're on your team is the number one thing.
Yeah, I agree with that. I wish more teachers would, sorry, not teachers. I wish more parents would communicate with me. I encourage it because, like Mark was saying, we're on the same team. It's good. It's nice to see parents involved and caring about their child's education like I do. And so, when they do reach out, it's very heartwarming, I feel, because that they care. They are concerned or just want to check in. And I also feel like it works me a little harder in a way, because for me, usually I have over 100 kids. It's hard to reach out individually to each parent and say, hey, your kid's doing this. They're doing great. Or, hey, just so you know, your kid is maybe not doing so great. So it's hard. It is really hard. And, when parents contact me, it does hold me a little bit more accountable, I feel like, for keeping them aware of, their kids' status in the class. So it's highly encouraged.
And especially during this time right now, is a lot of times, like, I might see a kid on camera that's looking wonderful, and then once we leave our meeting, they may be broken down in tears, and I don't see that right now. And I don't some of those things that might be happening, and it's really good to kind of know what the whole picture looks like, because in the classroom you get a better picture, but right now you only get those glimpses. So even if it's like, and you sometimes then if you're emailing the teacher, they might be able to work around an assignment. If it's an assignment you guys are just both really having a hard time with, and it's like, well, maybe this is something that's not as important, or maybe there's an alternative way to do the assignment, or maybe there's an alternative way to meet that learning objective that you can work through with the teacher.
Yeah, definitely. At the beginning of every year, I have a syllabus, and at the end, I actually have a spot for my parents to fill in anything that they want me to know about their kids that maybe I can't know by looking it up, in their file. And 90% of my parents write something on there that, their kid suffers from anxiety, or their kid is very shy, or their kid is not very motivated. Please try to give me ideas of how to motivate my kid. And it's really helpful when the parents reach out and tell us those things, because like Mark was saying, we might not know or see those things from our perspective, and just knowing that about your child can really make a difference for us and for them. Next tip here is just giving your child frequent breaks. It just depends on their schedule. For, secondary, I know that they typically only have a couple minutes in between class periods, but, primary grades, they may be given more breaks, and they can be anything. Stepping outside for a minute, or I put a teenager up here taking a nap, because we know teenagers love to sleep, making sure they set a timer, of course. Or, having a snack, like Mark was saying earlier. So I have some kids snacking, just getting their brain away from the computer for a minute, maybe doing a fun activity with them, depending on the time that you have, even if it's 5 minutes, a brain break activity, or just letting them rest. So I think frequent breaks are probably most helpful for younger kids, because they are, giddy, and Mark, you probably know more about that than I do, but they need to be up and walking around. So it's important.
Yeah. And I think this is an important thing of, I think a lot of times as a parent, sometimes when you're working with your kids during this time, it's really frustrating. There's times where it's just like, I'm doing this, I have to do this right now, I can't help you with this. But sometimes if you can look at that daily schedule and maybe build your meetings, if there's an opportunity to do that, to try to have that break, so you guys can actually have a positive time during the day, instead of having it during a time where you're like, well, I have 5 minutes now I'm going to go down there, but now my kid's on a meeting. So if you could look at the break time and maybe think of that, like she was saying, of having a fun activity, or maybe it's like you guys can go take the dog for a walk, or pick something out. And I think it's also, like I said, with breaks too, with these younger kids, if you are on a meeting during that time, have that activity already ready to go, what they can do, or have some options of what they can do during that time, of like, here's a book, or maybe if it's grandma and grandpa live close by, maybe talking with them and they could read a book to grandma and grandpa on the phones, or something like that.
I love that, Mark, because I think it's really important, even for us, full-time working parents, to disconnect from technology and walk away from our computer. I have to do that, whether I'm working in the office or at home, remote. I have to literally shut it down, walk away, and we have lunch together every day. So that's something that we do. So I make us sandwiches, or I cook us brunch or whatever. So we have lunch every day together, and I think that's extremely important. So I think that's a great idea, Mark. Planning your meetings maybe around your child's school schedule, so that you guys can at least have one break together. Yeah. That's a great tip.
And I think it needs to be a positive break too. So don't try to have the break and then be like, let's get you caught up on your work here.
Or do a chore.
Because I think sometimes what kids do is they're like, well, I wait for mom and dad to do the break for a half hour, and then you come right back and you've been working for that half hour trying to do the assignment, and then you never had your break. So really, those breaks need to be like, get away from the school, get away from the work for that time.
Absolutely.
I like that idea of having it set up prior to the break, and maybe even having it like having them do an independent activity, so the parent gets a break also, which is really important. So with that, I think also having their break time written down or as part of their schedule, so they can see and look forward to when they're going to get their next break. We did that when I had at home this last spring with my 8-year-old stepdaughter. It was a struggle, but whenever we would tell her, okay, your break's going to be in so-and-so or at so-and-so, she would be like, okay, all right, let's do this then. She kind of got like more excited, because I don't know, she thought time would fly by, I guess, but it does, it helps.
So it's having good structure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So reward system, I want to say first that this may not work for everybody. We tried it. It worked for us. But you kind of have to be, well, it just depends. So, I'll give you an example of what we did with my 8-year-old stepdaughter. We kind of did like a really in-depth reward system. So, Every time she would do an assignment or an activity, she would get a number of points between 1 and 3. And then we totaled it up at the end of the day. And if it ranged between a certain total of points, she would get a reward. And the rewards, they don't have to be expensive. We wanted to do rewards that, she wouldn't expect all the time for doing what she's sort of expected to do. So they would be very simple, like not doing chores for a day. She loved that. Or picking a dessert for the night. Or Wednesday mornings, we would have pancakes. If she did well the day before, she would get pancakes for breakfast, like a special breakfast. Some kids desire one-on-one time with their parents. You could do a game night. You could do baking. You could do a movie night. You could do a craft. I mean, you could do so many things that don't cost money. But like I said, it's up to the parent, however they want to reward their kid. And so that was sort of, it involved doing the math, and it involved writing it down every single day, keeping a very strict track of, what she was doing. That might not work for all parents. So it could be very informal and just something as simple as saying, okay, I want you to behave, be on your best behavior today. If you're on your best behavior today, we can have ice cream for dinner. Or if you don't want to use a dessert, you could say, you could pick dinner tomorrow night. Something that parents know their children best. So what motivates your kid. You choose, what sort of incentives work for your child. And it's also a good idea to sit down with your child and have them even pick out the incentives or the rewards, because then they feel like a part of the process. And that is what we did with our 8-year-old. And so I knew all the rewards we had, she wanted. It's a good way to motivate them for this time, because it is hard to sit and focus on a laptop for however many hours.
That's very similar to our 10-year-old. But with our teenager, they love money. She loves money. So we actually do $25 an A at the end of the semester. Ward, what do you do with your teenager? And what have you done in the past with your kids in high school?
Oh, man. Well, they do get some financial reward. Can't really go wrong with that.
You can't. And I mean, we get paid for working hard, as adults. So it's not like you're teaching them a bad lesson. It's just, making sure they know these are expectations, right?
Yeah.
So
one thing I always find important is never taking anything away.
right.
Or the reward system as being a kind of an extra, kind of a positive. So like if it is like reading, if you read to your kid every night, maybe it's like, hey, you get an extra 10 minutes of the book, you get another chapter. So it's not taking anything away, just adding a little bit more of something maybe that they already have, and so they can look forward to it and be like, I don't want to say, I used to be like 10 more minutes of give them 10 more minutes of Minecraft or something like that, but now it's like you're on screen so much right now that's kind of one of those things you might want to take away, not have them do.
Game night.
I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I know, and we can't speak for all parents, because all parents, they do their own thing with their children. But I've noticed that taking things away like a punishment, can in fact increase anxiety and depression. So I think having an incentive is so much better than taking something away. I am so glad that you brought that up. That is extremely important.
Yeah, Mark, I'm glad that you brought that up too. So the ideas that I gave, make sure that they're not things that you kind of already typically do with your child. They're things that you would do that are extra, right? So instead of saying, if those are things you already do, don't go backwards and say, well, if you don't do that, you don't get to have dessert tonight, or you don't get to pick dinner tomorrow. So they you want to make them things that are positive reinforcers. Definitely.
And positive goals too. So making sure those goals are written in a way like, if I don't raise my hand and shout out, then I'll get something. So maybe like, if I raise my hand, so just simple things of rewording it in a different way of making sure they're written as a positive thing that they'll do to get a positive reward.
Yeah, exactly. And then one last thing on here too is if you do decide to use point systems, make sure that you give your child a range. So, for example, with our daughter, we gave her the amount of points total she could get in a day. It was like 30 or something. Giving them some leeway. So I think we told her like between 25 and 30 points would get her reward. So that way, if, she messed up or made a mistake or didn't do what she was expected, she doesn't get discouraged and think, well, there's my chance. Now it doesn't matter the way I act or what I do the rest of the day, right? Because she still has an opportunity to get her reward because we all make mistakes, right? We're not perfect. So that's really important too. And then my next tip is less screen time in the evening. And this kind of has to do with motivation in a way because they're on the computer for a certain amount of hours a day. If you have them on in front of a screen all day long, when they wake up the next morning and just think, okay, I got to get on the screen again for school, they lose focus because they're constantly in front of a screen or with an electronic. So really trying to save that screen time for school because that is the most important screen time right now that they can have. And that includes TV in the evening. So trying to find different activities that you can do with your child in the evening that don't involve electronics or screen time. It can be going for a walk or playing a board game, or I had this bottom right picture where they're just playing on a bed, spending quality time together. So it will, I think, increase focus a little bit during the morning time when they actually have to be on the screens versus choosing to in the evenings, And this would be just for weekdays, weekends. We know that they're a little more lenient, but definitely during school. And then my last tip is to just breathe as a parent, because this is a learning curve for everybody, teachers included. Still, things change every single day. I'm still learning. And in my opinion, I think that everybody's mental health is the most important. So if your kid is struggling or if you're struggling, my advice as a teacher and a parent is to reach out to another parent or reach out to another adult where you can vent or relate to them and just tell them how you're feeling, because this is a really hard time for parents, kids, teachers, everybody. And just know that everybody's doing the best that they can. I just feel like right now mental health is most important, making sure that you are taking care of yourself and your child emotionally.
That's the number. That's actually in my notes that I had. I have a few words that written down here.
Mm-hmm.
Breathe, grace, practice, have a plan, fail, struggle. That's what I have written down here. And I just think for everyone, it is giving the grace to your teachers, giving the grace to yourself, giving your grace to the kids. We're all in this trying to do the best that we can, and then just working on it and just knowing that, there's going to be a lot of struggles. There will be some failures. It's okay for your kids right now. They're going to be okay. They're going to be all right. You're going to be all right. And just times maybe enjoy some of the little goals that might happen that wouldn't have happened. Maybe that's some of that extra time that you do get to spend, and you actually get to see the kids do school, it can be sort of a neat thing. But I know sometimes I want to pull my hair out and my wife wants to pull and but then once again, just know that we're all trying to do our best. So breathe, give grace to each other.
I love that. Thank you guys both so much. We just have a couple questions for you if you don't mind. And I think for us, because before we had upgraded our internet, we were having major technical issues. And, even when we stream to adults and we're streaming all of our online courses and education and training, we always tell our students, our agents, that it's technology, things happen, it's okay. Like, it's the world that we're living in. So it's how we respond to these, these things. And so my question to you is, what happens if our child, so someone's child has internet issues or technical difficulties with their computers? What happens then? I mean, do you spend extra time with the child? If so, what is the best way to get a hold of you to communicate? And then how much time do you usually spend with that person and with that child? And do they have a certain amount of time to turn in that work? How does that work?
I mean, I right now it's really being flexible with what happens, and sometimes it is if it's just a daily thing of one thing we did is actually practice if a call drops, how does the kid get back on? So even as little kids, we would practice like, okay, Mr. Clow went away, and I'd go off my screen, and it's like they would try to figure out how to come back. I think a lot of districts are doing a great job of actually knowing that districts are providing those different hotspots, reaching out to the district or the school. I think there are a lot of resources that maybe parents might not even know about that they'll provide. And then just kind of just making sure, I mean, as the teachers, we'll try to do the best we can do.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's out of our hands, but I think they can always put you in the right direction of what it is. And if something does go wrong, of being flexible with that assignment and maybe doing it a different way, or just sometimes like that one doesn't matter. So I know what, tell me what you know. Okay, let's move on. So
Yeah, hotspots have really been a blessing for our kids because most of our kids don't have internet. Their internet can be spotty. Usually my kids are really good at, as soon as they log in, they say, "Hey, Mrs. K, my internet's being, difficult today. Just wanted to give you a heads up." So just making sure, like Mark was saying, communicate with the teacher. And then also having a plan for your kid if they are not able to connect, maybe having them read, having them know ahead of time, okay, if you disconnect, I want you to read for 30 minutes. Or if you disconnect, I want you to, practice writing your letters or, whatever fits for their age. So having a backup plan and then communicating with the teacher, I think is the best that you can do. And then, yeah, like our district, for example, we have a technical support phone number, one phone number. The parents can call at any time. So making sure that the parent is aware, okay, who can I call or contact if we are having technical difficulties, internet or Chromebook or whatnot.
and I think kind of those things too, going back to that, is have a plan. I mean, that even just like internet connections, or if you're just like a kid and you're so angry or something like that, and you're like, I need to go talk to my mom, but mom's in a meeting, something like that, of practice that when you're not mad. Practice that at a different time, and then know, okay, well, what can I do, of having that space of doing those things instead of trying to just figure out in the moment. May sound silly to be like, okay, now you're really mad. What are you going to go do? And practice it, because I mean that's especially for younger kids, of like going, okay, well now, because when they're shut down and they're going crazy, they can't usually make the best decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. And then thank you for that. The last question that I have is, and I think this is a big one, especially with younger children at home, but how can I help support my child? Maybe my child has emotional or behavioral issues or disorders, and they have a really hard time paying attention. What advice can you give to parents that have children that, just can't sit still or pay attention?
I know that in our classrooms, just this week, some of our teachers put in these like rubber band, these bands, like a workout bands. They actually put them around the chair legs, because yes, the kids are still they're in the classroom now, but they're still sitting for long periods of time. So one piece of advice that I could give is giving them something to mess with, or something where they can move around. I told my kids this week, because it was my first week with them back, if you want to stand up at your desk, because they were not allowed to leave their desk area. If you want to stand up and work, do it, because I do that. And just trying to be flexible with them, giving them something to fidget with, and then frequent breaks for those kids too, because they need those the most.
Yeah, I mean, down to having that positive relationship as a team with your teacher. I think like I've had kids like last year when we first went into remote, of some of these kids where they may have been not as successful in the classroom, and then some of the things that they actually did outside, where we started like doing videos or did different ways of submitting work. It's like, you know what, there isn't just one way to show your learning. And I think one way, if you can work with the teacher sometimes, or if the teachers get to know the kid better, it's like, I'm going to have them do it this way. And that's what we do inside the classroom. Is inside the classroom, we're able to kind of differentiate a lot of our instruction, or differentiate a lot of what the kids are going to turn in. But in this distance learning environment, it's mostly kind of like one size fits all, which has kind of been one of the harder things. So working with that teacher of like, okay, here for this assignment, we're going to have him do this. For this assignment, we might have him do this. And I think that's where, if you have that positive relationship with that teacher, they're going to be more willing to work with you. And it's really like not trying to tell the teacher what to do. The teacher knows what to do. So they want to work with you. So it's working with the teacher, not working against them or trying to tell them how to. They're trying to do the best for your kid, even though sometimes you might not agree with them, but I know they are.
Yeah, communication is key for sure. Being on the same page.
Mm-hmm. I have a question. So if you have, maybe this is more for Christina, since you have a little bit older kids in your classes, but let's say, ideally parents checking in every couple of weeks or whatever, and it's about the kids can't keep up or whatever, and the parent isn't really, they don't know how to explain the problem, or whatever, they haven't been in school for a while. How do they catch up? Like, how do they really need some help? How does that work?
I think it depends on their schedule. Before we came back in person, we were doing, our school, not all schools do this, but we have a response to intervention time for our kids. It's like additional support time. So in the mornings, they'd have their core classes. In the afternoons, I don't know if you guys remember that schedule I showed you from my school. The afternoons would be their RTI classes. So those would be the times that the kids would come back into my Google Meet if they needed additional help. Now we don't have it anymore because we moved back in person to an AM and PM. So some kids attend morning, some kids attend afternoon. So they got rid of the RTI. I think I don't think I've ever turned down a student or a parent that has asked me to put in any extra time before school to help their child, because it's my job. I think the only way to make that happen is just having your child or parent communicate to the teacher, my kid is behind. Please, what can we do to help them? Can you give an extra 20 minutes? For my schedule, our contracted time is 7 a.m. to 4:20 p.m. We are now on 4-day work weeks, so we get Fridays off. But I have 30 minutes in the morning. I have an hour-long lunch. I have over 30 minutes after school. That is my time. And so I would tell my parents or children or students, meet me at this time. Come at this time. I have the extra time to help you. So I think it really comes back to communication.
And from a high school standpoint, Ward, my daughter, she struggles with math, and I can tell you that her math teacher has been, responsive, and she also has set times. So she'll be like, okay, meet me at this time in the morning or over lunch or after school. And she has not turned down one late assignment that she has turned in. And so I know from a parent standpoint, I really appreciate that, because I can't imagine her trying to get caught up, trying to figure out this whole remote learning environment, dealing with her anxiety and turning in late work that isn't going to be accounted for. So I definitely appreciate that from a parent standpoint, watching my child struggle with a certain subject, working really hard to get caught up, and then having that, and it might not be full credit, but at least she gets points for it. and she understands what's going on.
Yeah, our school's policy is we have to accept late work. We cannot dock points for late work because it doesn't show that the student doesn't know the knowledge or the skill. They just didn't turn it in when it was supposed to be turned in. So we are not allowed to do that. And which, I agree with that. And we are on standards-based grading. So we grade on standards. We don't grade on if they got 8 out of 10 correct. We don't use the traditional grading. So if they turn in something a week late, but you can see that they're meeting the standard, you give them, their grade.
I mean, I don't think that's something we should tell our children, that all late work will be accepted, because there's a due date for everything. But that's just really nice to know from a parent standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Christina and Mark, I want to thank you both again so much for taking time out of your day, out of your busy schedules, to share all of your experience and knowledge and insight with, our agents and parents in our community. And if you are watching, we hope that you take all of, this advice and all of these tips to your advantage, because we know that this is not an easy time for parents, and especially working parents at home with children that are in school, whether it's full-time or part-time. So we hope that you get a lot out of this video, and we hope that you are all staying safe and have a wonderful day.